Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jeff Dover. With me is John Barban. Let's talk football.
All right, Buckeyes did it. National
Yep.
champs. They completed the job that they were expected to complete right at the very beginning of the season. One little trip up, maybe one.
Yeah.
I don't think the Oregon game was a trip up. That the
No.
Michigan game kind of was
just an anomaly. It's an outlier.
Yep.
Because for pretty much every other game, they did not look like that.
Nope.
So who knows what happened that one?
Mm-hmm.
But and they had to take the tough road in the playoffs, right? Because they didn't get a bye, so they had to do all 3 rounds. And hats off to them, because that was a pretty. I had a note here that, like, in the third quarter, this is going to go down as one of the worst championship games ever, just because they were like running away with it. And it was,
I got a text message from Brad, and it just said prediction 50-7, and I just responded, it looks like that.
Yeah.
I mean, boy, yes. After that, when it went to 31-7, I thought, okay, this is going to get really ugly.
Yeah.
But they kind of. All right, where do you even want to start here?
We can just go through chronologically. So so we had Notre Dame minus the plus.
Oh my God, we missed it by a half a point with that stupid. Or
the field goal. Field goal would have had it for us. No, so we had Notre Dame plus 8.5, and we had the under a couple different ways. And so the opening drive, I'm like, cash money, can't lose. Long drive, ending in a touchdown, and how they did it, right? Like running right at Ohio State, can't lose.
That was one of the craziest open. It was 10 minutes.
Yeah,
that drive. Now Leonard barfed afterwards, like that was way too much on him. Yeah. But I thought, okay, this is them kind of showing that they belong on the field, because the narrative is they're undermanned. They just don't have the same personnel as Ohio State. I guess everyone really kind of doesn't really have their personnel. But in this case, go ahead.
Yeah, going into the game, every single preview show podcast was just about how Notre Dame can stay with them.
Yeah,
that's all everyone said. Like, because it's pretty much understood that Ohio State had the better roster. That's why they were favored by 8.5 points. So it was every single thing was how Notre Dame could make it a game and what they'd have to do, and stuff like that, right? So it's exactly that.
And so they showed, oh, maybe they do belong on the field. Now, it was obviously a lot on Leonard, but when there's only one game left, you can kind of do that. Like, and it doesn't. I used to be the reverse, where I thought, well, that's not an NFL quarterback, but who cares? This isn't the NFL. This is college.
No, this is what you got to do to get the win, or like, and so, it wasn't. I think it's actually a good way of doing it, because he never runs that much. And so it was clear that they weren't super prepared for it. So Leonard was really effective running there. There was 18 plays, a really sustained drive, and not really like crazy penalties either.
And just chipping away 3 and 4 yards at a time. It was,
and so that was good. And then Ohio State said, "Hold my beer," and scored 31 unanswered points.
Do you realize the final rushing yards for Notre Dame was 53, and 45 of them were on that drive?
Yeah,
on that first drive. Now they do subtract sack yards from that, but regardless, on the final stat, so that is awful.
Yeah, that
was
the
rest of the game.
Just like in Ohio State season, they killed on pretty much every team except, and then there's whatever happened against Michigan, and in Notre Dame, Ohio State killed them at all phases of the game, except for that opening drive, right?
Yeah.
That was for the most part. So anyway, it was 31 unanswered points, and it was over at that point. Like, Notre Dame, and again, hats off to them for making it a game later. When you start calculating like how many touchdowns and 2-point conversions do we have to go to like make this an actual game, and then when you get one, we're like, hey, we're only 2 away.
Another one. Yeah.
So that's sort of a bit much, but hats off to them for even getting it to that point. But it's 31 unanswered points, and it was what I was really struck by was how different it looked compared to when Notre Dame had the ball. Like, Notre Dame, it was an 18-play drive to get the touchdown, and then Ohio State was just getting chunks of yards, and people were like Smith was wide open, which should not happen. And so we talked about that going into the game, that he looked he was invisible in the one game where he had the 3 yards or
Mm.
whatever, right? And people, rightfully pointed out he was double, triple covered, like in the zone. And Notre Dame went with man, and they just could not contain Ohio State enough. So
yeah, there's just too much fire at it seems like every time we talk about Ohio State, we just keep saying there's too much firepower, which is true. Like they just too many guys. They had to deal with Smith, Abuka, Tate, everyone.
Henderson
Henderson,
Judkins.
and Judkins. Fuck, Judkins had a game, three touchdowns, and he was rushing and receiving. That guy, man, he looked awesome. He jumped right off the screen all game long. And then I have a note here. Notre Dame did play mostly the type of game they needed to play, minus not being able to run. They had no turnovers. And they only had 3 penalties. And we said before the game, I'm sure everyone said this, Notre Dame's going to have to play a clean game. They're going to have to win the turnover battle, which they did. They can't kill themselves with penalties, which they didn't. And so from that standpoint, they more or less played how they were supposed to. They just don't have the manpower.
Couldn't move it on offense. They had like 2 or 3 3-and-outs in a row, right? And I'm like, that's you can't do that. Like you can't give the other team that many possessions, right? So it was and one of the 3-and-outs was really bad because it was a critical like 3rd and 5, and they had like a muffed snap or something, like they were not in the right place or whatever. And I'm like, you really needed at that point to give your defense a break and have the ball for a little bit more, and then that was an absolute killer.
Yeah, the other thing is they could not at the line of, first of all, Ohio State was beating them on both lines of scrimmage, the first drive notwithstanding. For the rest of the game, Ohio State's defensive line was completely in control. And they were causing trouble all night long for Leonard. They didn't show up in a lot of sacks, but they were hurrying the pass, like just really disruptive, even though it doesn't show up with like this gaudy stat of tackles for losses and a bunch of sacks. It was completely disruptive and completely shutting down the run game after that first drive. There was just no yards to be had on the ground. And then their offensive line also won the line of scrimmage. Every time, let me not say every time, it was very rare for Notre Dame pressure, especially when they were sending extra guys, to ever get through. And to me, the example of the entire game was that final pass to Smith that sealed the entire game, where they went 0 blitz. There's no safety help. And whoever was the remaining best DB on the team, their actual best DB wasn't in this game. He's been out almost all year, or we've been out for a while. Whoever was the guy who was left on the field, I think it's Gray, whoever the best DB left on the field was 1-on-1 on Smith. And he had 0 chance of covering it. First of all, didn't press him, gave him a cushion, and he was wide open. Now, good for Howard. Good for Howard for getting it there. But they sent the house, and it just hit a brick wall. And pressure was never getting through to him.
It looked like that play, it really looked like it was going to be successful from the beginning, because he gave Smith so much space, and you could tell it was 1-on-1, and it's an absolute killer, because you can't let, that's the one guy you can't let, like other teams fell, you can't let that guy can't let Smith beat you, but they did. And it was just I don't know. I disagree with how they, I don't know. It just,
there's not much else you can do there. You have to get him. You have to get Leonard, and it's just the blitz was never getting through.
I know.
Ohio State was better at protecting than they ever were at getting there. And now I talk about being undermanned. They didn't have anybody on the D line over 280 pounds ish. They could have used, and now their best guy was it Riley Mills wasn't there. So it's
that's a good difference. So like in every other game I've seen with Notre Dame play, they would get pressure with their starting 4, and it didn't happen this game.
Not even a little bit.
No, the other thing I wanted another note that I had was the Ohio State killed them in the middle eights, right? Which is that's been Notre Dame's
calling card
all season, and they do a really good job with that. And even if you don't score, like even if a touchdown, like even if it's a field goal, but you just have the ball and the other team doesn't, that's a big deal. But Ohio State scored late to make it, to go from 14-7 to 21-7. So they get a late touchdown to make it 21-7. Then they get the ball first and score, to go 28-7. And it was a killer. So there was middle eight Notre Dame, and then that was one of the main things that led to this.
Yeah.
But it was Notre Dame had 308 yards on offense, but it was, I think it's like only from a couple of drives, and the rest of it was like zero. You know what I mean? Like it was really
the opening drive was whatever it was, 75.
Yeah.
And then all the rest of the desperation yards at the end there.
Right.
I have a note here. Do you think Notre Dame waited too long to just start taking shots? I mean, they couldn't.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I was shocked that after it went 31-7, they were even attempting anything other than shots downfield. It's like it's not working. You can't block them.
Right.
You actually have 0 yards rushing besides the first drive.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear whatever's going on since the first drive, they've adjusted. I almost wonder if that first drive was making him feel like he could do it again, and he clearly couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he finally just started going for 50-50 balls, Greathouse, why not involve him a little sooner?
Yeah, he looked good.
And just go. I don't know. I just thought they should have been in way more desperation attack mode right after Ohio State scored on the first drive of the second half. There was none of this. We're going to still run the offense. Nope. Obviously it's not working. Just go for it. And because there was a few, they could have actually maybe even closed the gap further if they hit a couple more of those big plays. And also, Ohio State fans, were they sweating when Igbenogin was just kept taking pass interference after pass interference? I actually said at one point, I said, throw it at number one or to number one, right? Greathouse is number one, but I just said, whoever, if number one's out there, throw it to whoever's there. And if you can get Greathouse on him and just don't stop.
Yeah.
And
they mentioned on the broadcast, they're like how many that guy's had on the season, which was significant
the most in the
too.
FBS, right?
Yeah. So no, that's a good point. And it was, so in terms of to your first point about the taking shots, I really thought that with one of the field goal attempts, I was sort of like, why are you doing that now?
And then it missed anyways.
Because that was like, this does not seem like this isn't going to get you back in it. Like you really needed but so that was the time where it really struck out to me. Like they're,
too conservative.
You're not taking enough shots there.
Yeah, I've always wondered that. Like, does the coach not sense that none of this is working? And how many more times is he going to try to run a short run or just a dump off pass to the side? Like, I know that obviously that's part of the defense taking away other things, but it's not going to work. Like, you have to start challenging downfield. At this point, it almost is a little bit, well, hopefully we get a PI. Hopefully just a lucky play. Like, you just got to start going 50-50 balls. And even if you're outmanned or you just don't have the talent, none of what you're doing is working, and doing more of it's still not going to all of a sudden magically work where, Jeremiah Love just might break one. No, it's not happening.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I thought the only other note that I had was, I thought it was a really it was a clean game, not many penalties. It was a really not many turnovers. So it was just executed well. And Notre Dame couldn't execute enough on offense early on. And I feel like the only way they did, especially like those 2 touchdowns at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, was really more about the prevent defense. I felt that was Ohio State was just keeping everything in front of them. And so more stuff was open than it would have been normally. But what I will say,
and with that said, not much was open. They were just making it happen.
It was really tough, and it was But when they get the touchdown with 4 minutes 15 seconds left to bring it within 8, and I remember thinking, like, there's 4 minutes left, and Notre Dame has all 3 timeouts, so like there's a chance, right? In this thing, it really didn't feel like it up until that point.
Yeah,
but I was like, that's again, we've talked about it before, but that's. To me, is a sign of really good coaching, that they didn't have to burn the timeouts for not being aligned correctly or not getting the play in time. So I thought that was awesome. So, but it didn't matter, and Ohio State just controlled it after that. And the last field goal was painful and they even mentioned it on the broadcast, because it was. It was an 8-point game at that point, and everyone knew the spread was 8.5. And
it wasn't always 8.5. It moved around, didn't it?
Yeah, but it closed at 8.5. I'm pretty sure, and it was and so they could like kneel the ball or something like that, or it's like, are they going to be in a position to kick the field? Are they going to attempt to kick the field goal? So, but that ruined it.
Yeah, that
for
sucked. I was like, with 30 seconds left, we're going to lose our bet here.
Yeah.
Oh well.
So, but I mean, also when it was 31-7, I didn't feel like we had any shot.
No, I thought we were toast. But then when it got back but then when he missed the field goal, I thought, oh, damn it. Well, this is tight, but we might still cover here. So it's now that's not, if we did cover, that's not how I would expect it to look for the cover we were thinking of.
No.
But in the end, it's just, they were just outmanned. Now, I wonder if this is going to feed the narrative that Notre Dame gets preferential treatment and placed in this game, or at least placed in the playoffs where they don't belong. But they went through three pretty good teams to get here.
This is the, there's a lot of controversy about the 12-team playoff and what they should do or have, but both teams that were in the championship game had the long road, right? Like neither of them got the bye, right? So, and they beat good teams, but Notre Dame beat Georgia, like in Indiana, like they were good teams. So it's really, it's weird how this is the first time Notre Dame looked outmanned, like they didn't look outmanned
totally
against Georgia or Indiana. And so it's a little surprising to see it here, but but listen, they put themselves in a position, with 4 minutes to go to, the one possession game. So, but yeah, you just can't, 31 unanswered points and so many 3 and outs, you just can't overcome that. So,
kind of everyone looks outmanned against Ohio State. I mean, maybe Texas looked not quite as badly outmanned, but everyone in the playoffs more or less looked like they really weren't lining up against an equally power. I mean, there was just too much on the other side of the field. When you're, at least in this playoff run, Ohio State just was bad. It didn't take long during any of these games to be like, oh, that's the better team. Like, it's kind of obvious.
No, and what's really surprising about this team, or one of the characteristics I take away from, is that the only team that can stop Ohio State is Ohio State. So when they're on, they're literally unstoppable. I think about the beginning of the game against Oregon, where everything was working and they just had no answers. And the only time where I see them not working well is like maybe not a great play call, or something just doesn't get blocked right. But it was like, but most of the time, like if they're executing, then it's literally unstoppable. So and that's what it was like when they had the 4 touchdowns and a field goal in a row. Like there's too many weapons. So
it's too much.
Yeah.
Now, I guess the other thought here is the 12-team playoff theoretically put whoever really deserved to be there here. If somebody wants, if a detractor, a Notre Dame detractor, well, they don't have a conference, and who did they really beat in the regular season and all of that stuff. And even though they had to go through 3 playoff teams to get to this game, who would you have placed in this game that could have been more competitive? Like, I mean, the whole country.
Yeah.
Not just of the 12 playoff teams. Is there anyone else? And I guess you can also factor in the beating they put on other people in the playoffs. So you can't really say any of those 3 teams because they kicked all of their butts on the way in here. Right. So Tennessee had no chance. Oregon had no chance. I guess Texas was closer, but Texas was closer. Like, would that have been more the competitive team, Texas?
An Ole Miss or South Carolina A game? Maybe.
A game. Maybe Ole Miss's A game. Yeah. I don't think South Carolina could keep up with that.
I was just throwing that out there.
That's the if people are dissatisfied with this, and the score 34-23 doesn't look terrible, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't a competitive game.
The 31-7, I was like, at that point, I one of my notes was like, this will go down as one of the worst championship games ever.
Yeah.
But Notre Dame came back. They came back. They were within one possession, with 4 minutes to go. Like, that's not nothing. So,
but to your point, part of that was the fumble.
Yes.
The only fumble in the game was part of what got Notre Dame back in this.
That's what good teams do, though.
Yeah, right. Capitalize on mistakes.
Yeah.
And then keeping within that theme, Ohio State only had 6 penalties, but about 4 of them were on that drive.
Yeah.
And they were all, so it all sort of, that's why I was saying, were Ohio State fans just sweating a little bit? Oh, here's the fumble. Oh, here are all the penalties. Oh, here we go. To your point, the only team that can beat Ohio State's Ohio State, and they kind of were doing it for a little bit there in the second half.
Yep, that's the only reason why it got close. I think it's part of the defense that they were calling, because in Notre Dame, we've talked about this before, but when you go in the prevent defense, it's good. I understand it. You want to keep everything in front of you. You don't want to let the other team score. That's the only way This gets sweaty as if the other team scores quickly. So that's why everyone plays back. But a lot of stuff's open. The quarterback gets in a groove, is completing a lot of stuff. There's like everything starts working on offense. And so that's it doesn't, that's not a good option. It doesn't, I don't know, it looks terrible like when that happens too. So, but it's listen, there was the last drive really summed it up. It's like Notre Dame couldn't stop them when they needed to. And they couldn't stop them numerous times on the day. And so the only way Notre Dame would have a chance if they could have stopped them, and they just didn't enough times. So
no, and that was really it. They're just, their A game's not enough to beat Ohio State's A game. Is kind of really what it is.
What
and
they
kind of played as good as you could play, and no turnovers, no penalties. Like that's sort of how you were supposed to play, but they just didn't have the manpower.
No, it really looked like they made a big deal about the zone defense versus the man defense for Indiana too, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame was mixing it up. None of it worked.
Yeah, but it was like, whenever they were in the man defense, it really looked like they were struggling.
Yeah, they just didn't have the personnel for it. But who does against that offense? Will Howard played a tight game too. He played pretty good. There was
really
nothing.
Good.
Yeah, there was,
and that was a great example you talked about earlier. But like that throw to Smith at the end, that basically sealed it there. Like it was getting a big first down. Like that was he was open, and it was a one-on-one matchup.
Still got to hit him.
You still got to hit him. And so
the other thing there is he played off. He didn't play press.
Right.
And you would hope that by playing off, he still can't get behind you, and he still was like 5 yards behind him.
I know. Like it's like a lot of space to the sideline too.
So what's the point of not? Your worry when you press is that he's going to beat you on the line, and
I know.
But you give him a 10-yard cushion, and he still runs past you. Like,
I know.
What the hell is that?
I know. So when you're that far back, you're sort of giving up like the quick slant or the 6 years. So like that would have been open on that play, and the deep pass was open. So that's just not good.
Yeah. Well, and I guess and all of it just, I mean, I don't even think it matters what that DB was doing. That whole play hinged on the pressure getting there. And when it didn't, like when you saw it, they just stonewalled all of that pressure. You're like, oh, this is going to work. Smith ain't dropping anything out there. And that was it. So that was kind of a microcosm of the whole game. That one
It really
play.
was. It really was. No, that's a good point. Like, because Notre Dame didn't get enough pressure. And then, and when you can play man defense and have really good one-on-one, but if the pressure doesn't get there, then your defense will break down, and then people will be open. So
well, it's a good run for Notre Dame and Ohio State. Do you think all the pressure's off Ryan Day now for sure?
Great question. It's hard not to. Like it's their first championship in 10 years. They've had some really good teams. They've had some really good coaches in the past. But winning a national championship is a big deal. But like as we've seen before, it happened with Auburn. It happened with LSU. Like a year later, if there's a problem, then you can be let go. So he'll start next season fully comfortable in his position. If they lose to Michigan again,
goldfish memory.
If they, that's happened a lot. It was Ed Orgeron, like in LSU, and it was Gene Chizik, I think it was Auburn. Like they were, national championship. It was a big deal. But then it was within 2 years. It was like, nope. So he's good for next year.
He's good for one more year.
Yeah. Which is sort of what every coach is in major college football,
He's a pretty good resume. They beat Indiana, who was ranked at the time. They beat
Georgia. That was the one that both of us thought that they were.
Oh no, I don't mean them. I mean Ohio State, but that too, right? That too. Okay. But they beat Ohio State, beat Tennessee, Oregon, Texas. Notre Dame right here.
Oregon was undefeated all season. Tennessee was a really hot team late.
They beat Penn State. And Indiana, which I guess technically that's two more playoff teams they beat. So Ohio State beat half of the teams that made the playoffs.
A really strong team. Like again, it was just that everyone keeps bringing up the Michigan thing. It's a really anomaly. Like that's just an absolute anomaly.
Right out of left field there.
Everything else they've crushed it. So
and then on Notre Dame's side, just the final note about like who they beat this season. USC should have been an impressive win, but it turned out it wasn't a big deal this year.
No.
Florida State at the beginning of the season would be like, oh, that's going to be one of their signature wins. It's not. Turns out Navy was a signature win. Who would have thought that? And you know what? Beating Georgia Tech this year was a given the trouble Georgia Tech gave Georgia and beating Miami. I actually went back and watched that game before this one.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so Georgia Tech was a pretty strong team against strong teams this year.
Yep.
And Notre Dame handled them in that game.
Yeah.
Like they really handled them.
No, then this is a good point to bring up, like the strength of schedule, because Notre Dame's regular season strength of schedule was not good.
Not
which
impressive.
is part of the reason why they ended up where they were in the playoffs and had to take the long route in.
Mm-hmm.
But hats off to them, because they beat Indiana and they beat Georgia, like those, which were really, really good teams.
And Penn State and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So if you want to add up some good, the better teams they beat this year, A&M, Penn State, Georgia, Indiana, it's not bad. It's not quite what Ohio State went through, but it was, that playoff run is, you have to consider that legitimate.
It's absolutely legitimate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so Ohio State won the first 14 playoff, and now they've won the first 12-team playoff.
Good
I think
call.
is the thing.
Nice
and
take.
The last time Notre Dame was in the national championship was the last championship before the 14 playoff, where it was kind of ugly. That's when they got beat by the team got beat by Alabama, and Manti Te'o got beat by a mythical girlfriend, which was a little embarrassing. Well, I don't know. What do you arrows up for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman, I think.
Yeah, because that other quarterback looked really good too, right? Like that guy.
Yeah.
So
and Jelly.
Yep. So he looks good, and and a couple of articles were on ESPN earlier this week about that Notre Dame's really found their guy with Freeman. It seems like a great fit. They played well.
Players seem to love him.
They absolutely, so like that's really positive going forward. So.
Yeah, I sent you that video where the players went bananas when they announced that he's the new coach. So they're obviously on board. They, as far as personnel, they need they need a little bit more depth on the line and something more at receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just been a story for Notre Dame for so long. They got to I don't know how one team can just be characteristically missing a particular position group for so long.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a philosophy or something, but they really need some stronger outside threats.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Well, I think that's it. God, this sucks. Sucks that the season's over.
I was just going to say that. It was just, this is really, it was a great season. It was great to have the expanded playoffs. I'm going to miss it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they're going to change some of that. But anyway, we're not done here. We're going to be here weekly. We're going to be covering all kinds of stuff.
We got some good ideas for some shows in the off season.
Yeah, this is our first go at it. We obviously just started this year at the beginning of the actual season, so this is technically our first off season on the program. So we've got some ideas. We're going to throw them up there, see if they work. If you guys have ideas that you want us to cover, or just any concept that you think would be fun to put on the show, for sure, leave it in the comments and let us know, and we'll just see what's entertaining, what's fun, because now we're all in this together. We're stuck until until September for football.
We're college football fans, just like the rest of you. We miss it when it's not there too. So what would you like to hear? What would we like to do? For our shows until we get
what's going to help us all get through to September.
Exactly.
That's what we're going to be doing
here. That's a great way of putting it.
Yep. All right. Well, with that said, we'll be back next week with something. So we'll see you then.